A wrongfully convicted cop begs for one last hug with his daughter before being locked away forever. But when she whispers two shocking words in his ear, everything changes, setting off a chain of events that uncovers a massive conspiracy, puts his daughter's life in danger, and leaves an entire city stunned. What happens next will leave you speechless. Carter Briggs had always believed in justice. He had spent 15 years serving the city as a dedicated detective, building a reputation for being fearless, fair, and relentless in his pursuit of the truth. But on this day, none of that mattered. The same justice system he had sworn to uphold was about to betray him in the worst way possible. It started as a normal evening. Carter had just picked up his 10-year-old daughter, Ivy, from school. She was his entire world, the one thing that made all the long nights and difficult cases worth it. They had planned to spend the night together, watching movies and eating takeout. But before they could even get inside the house, the sound of screeching tires filled the air. Carter instinctively turned, shielding Ivy behind him as several unmarked police cars swarmed his driveway. His heart pounded in his chest as uniformed officers poured out, their weapons drawn. "Detective Carter Briggs," a voice boomed over a megaphone. "Step away from the child and put your hands in the air." Confusion and anger crashed over him. He recognized the officers. These were his colleagues, men he had worked alongside for years. His former partner, Detective Ryan Hayes, stepped forward, his face unreadable as he aimed his weapon at Carter. "Ryan, what the hell is going on?" Carter demanded, keeping one arm protectively around Ivy, who clung to his leg, her small hands trembling. "You're under arrest," Hayes said, his voice heavy. "For the murder of Robert Hale." Carter's mind reeled. Robert Hale? The name was familiar, an informant he had worked with in the past. But murder? That was impossible. "You've got the wrong guy," Carter shouted. "I didn't kill anyone." But the officers didn't hesitate. They moved in, shoving him to the ground. "Daddy!" Ivy screamed, tears streaming down her face as two officers pried her away from him. "Don't fight it, Carter," Hayes muttered as he snapped the handcuffs around Carter's wrists. "The evidence is overwhelming." Carter gritted his teeth, anger boiling in his veins. Evidence? Someone had set him up, and whoever it was had done a damn good job. As they pulled him to his feet, Carter locked eyes with Captain Nolan Graves, the head of his department. Graves stood near one of the police cars, arms crossed, his face as cold as stone. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look disappointed. He looked satisfied. That's when Carter knew, this wasn't a mistake. This was a setup. They shoved him into the back of the police car, but his eyes stayed on Ivy, who stood frozen on the sidewalk, sobbing, her tiny hands balled into fists. "Daddy," she cried again, her voice breaking. Carter struggled against his restraints. "Ivy. It's going to be okay. I promise." The doors slammed shut, and the car pulled away, leaving his daughter behind. As they drove through the city he once swore to protect, Carter knew one thing for certain: someone wanted him out of the way. And if he didn't figure out who, he would never see his daughter again. Carter sat in the cold, dimly lit interrogation room, his wrists aching from the tight handcuffs binding him to the steel table. The air smelled of stale coffee and sweat, a scent he had grown accustomed to over the years of questioning criminals in this very room. But tonight, he was the one being interrogated. Across from him, Detective Ryan Hayes paced back and forth, his expression unreadable. A thick case file lay open on the table, filled with crime scene photos, forensic reports, and witness statements. Every piece of it pointed directly at Carter. "You were seen leaving Robert Hale's apartment the night he was murdered," Hayes said, stopping to glare at him. "Your fingerprints were found on the murder weapon. And we have a surveillance video of someone matching your description entering his building 2 hours before his body was discovered." Carter leaned forward, his jaw tightening. "You know damn well I was nowhere near that apartment that night," Ryan. Hayes sighed, rubbing his temples. Carter, the evidence is overwhelming. If you have something to say, now is the time. This is the only chance you'll get to help yourself. Carter slammed his fists against the table. I don't need to help myself because I didn't do this. His voice echoed through the small room. Think about it, Ryan. I worked with Hale for years. If I wanted him dead, I wouldn't be stupid enough to leave a trail of evidence like this. Hayes hesitated, but only for a second. You had motive. Hale was about to testify against some major players in the underworld, people you had cases against. Maybe you got nervous. Maybe he was going to expose something about you. Carter let out a bitter laugh. You really think I'd throw away my entire career? My daughter? For what? Hayes didn't answer. Carter narrowed his eyes. Who's pushing this, Ryan? Who gave you the order to come after me? Before Hayes could respond, the door swung open. Captain Nolan Graves entered the room, his presence suffocating. His face was as emotionless as ever, but his eyes held a dark amusement that made Carter's stomach churn. That's enough, Graves said, motioning for Hayes to step back. Detective Briggs has had his chance to cooperate. Carter clenched his fists. You don't believe this, do you, Captain? Graves smirked, taking a slow step forward. It's not about what I believe, Briggs. It's about the facts. And the facts say you killed Robert Hale. Carter's blood ran cold. This was his doing. You son of a... Carter lunged forward, but the handcuffs yanked him back. Graves chuckled, unbothered. You always thought you were untouchable, didn't you, Briggs? Always sticking your nose where it didn't belong. He leaned in, lowering his voice so only Carter could hear. You should have stayed in line. Carter's heart pounded. Graves wasn't just letting this happen, he was orchestrating it. Hayes shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. You're going away for a long time, Detective, Graves continued. And no one is coming to save you. Carter forced himself to stay calm. I won't rot in prison for something I didn't do. Graves smirked again. You don't have a choice. He turned to Hayes. Take him to holding. He'll be transferred after his sentencing. As the officers dragged Carter away, he kept his head high. He refused to break in front of Graves. But inside, rage burned like an inferno. As they led him down the dark hallway, he thought about Ivy, her terrified face, the way she clung to him before they ripped her away. No. This wasn't over. He would fight. He would prove his innocence. And most of all, he would see his daughter again. Carter sat on the hard cot in his small holding cell, his hands balled into fists. The cold concrete walls pressed in around him, the flickering fluorescent light above making the entire place feel like a bad dream. Except this wasn't a dream, this was his new reality. His head throbbed with unanswered questions. Who had set him up? Why Hale? And how deep did this conspiracy go? But the biggest question of all was one he couldn't shake: what was happening to Ivy? His daughter had seen him dragged away in cuffs, and now she was alone with Lauren, his ex-wife, who had already started pulling Ivy away from him long before his arrest. Was she telling Ivy that he was guilty? That he was never coming home? The thought made his stomach turn. The clanking of metal bars snapped him out of his thoughts. A guard stood outside his cell. Briggs, you've got a visitor. His heart jumped. Ivy? But as he stepped into the visitation room, his hope faded. It wasn't Ivy. It was Lauren. She sat stiffly on the other side of the glass, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes, those told him everything. She thought he was guilty. Carter slowly picked up the phone on his side of the glass. Lauren hesitated, then did the same. I don't even know what to say to you, she started, her voice hollow. You could start with, "I know you didn't do this," Carter said, his jaw tight. Lauren scoffed. "How am I supposed to believe that, Carter? The evidence is stacked against you. Your fingerprints were on the gun. Your car was seen near the crime scene. There's video footage of a man your height, your build, walking into Hale's apartment that night." Carter exhaled sharply, gripping the phone tighter. "I don't care what the evidence says, I didn't do it. You've known me for years, Lauren. Do you really think I could kill someone in cold blood?" She looked away for a moment, biting her lip. "I don't know what to think anymore," she admitted. "But I have to think about Ivy." His chest tightened. "Where is she?" "She's with me," Lauren said. "And I don't want her coming here to see you like this." Carter's blood turned to ice. "You can't keep her from me." Lauren's face hardened. "I can. And I will if I have to. I won't let her get dragged into this nightmare any more than she already has." Carter shook his head. "Lauren, listen to me. Someone set me up. And I think Ivy might be in danger." Lauren frowned. "What are you talking about?" Carter leaned in closer to the glass. Hale wasn't just some random informant. He was about to testify against someone big. Someone powerful. And now, conveniently, he's dead, and I'm taking the fall. Lauren's expression wavered. "Even if that's true, what does that have to do with Ivy?" Carter hesitated. He didn't want to scare her, but she needed to know the truth. "I think someone's watching her," he said carefully. "Before my arrest, I noticed a car parked near her school multiple times. Same make, same model, same plates. And if these people went through all this trouble to frame me, you think they won't come after the only person who could prove I was somewhere else that night?" Lauren paled. "She's just a kid, Carter. And that won't stop them," he said grimly. "I need you to promise me something." She hesitated. "What?" "Keep Ivy close. Don't let her out of your sight. If you see anything, even the smallest thing, that feels wrong, you call Detective Mia Calloway. She's the only person on the force I trust." Lauren looked away, conflicted. "I don't know if I should trust you, Carter." His chest ached at those words. He had spent years loving her, protecting her, building a family. And now, she didn't know if she could trust him. "Fine," he said finally. "Then don't do it for me. Do it for her." For a moment, she didn't respond. Then, finally, she nodded. "I'll keep her safe." That was all he needed to hear. The guard stepped forward. "Time's up." Carter clenched his jaw, gripping the phone for just a second longer before reluctantly setting it down. "Find Mia," he said as he stood up. "She'll tell you the truth." Lauren didn't reply, but he saw it in her eyes, the slightest glimmer of doubt about his guilt. It wasn't much. But it was something. As the guards led him back to his cell, a single thought burned in his mind. Ivy had to be protected at all costs. And if the system wouldn't fight for him, then he would tear it down himself. Carter sat on the edge of his cot, staring at the gray concrete wall of his cell. His mind raced, replaying every detail of his conversation with Lauren. Ivy saw something. She didn't just witness his arrest, she saw something that mattered. Something dangerous. But what? The pieces didn't fit yet, but one thing was clear: whoever framed him wasn't finished. If Ivy was a threat, she was in danger. And from behind bars, there was nothing he could do to protect her. He needed Mia Calloway. Carter had worked with Mia for years. She was one of the few officers in the department who hadn't turned her back on him after his arrest. If anyone could find the truth, it was her. A guard approached his cell, unlocking the bars. "You've got another visitor, Briggs." Carter stood up, half expecting Lauren again. But when he walked into the visitation room, his heart nearly stopped. Mia was already waiting for him. She was dressed in her usual dark pants and blazer, her badge clipped to her belt. Her face was unreadable, but Carter knew that look. She had questions. He sat down, picking up the phone on his side of the glass. Mia did the same, exhaling sharply. "I shouldn't be here," she muttered, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one was listening. Carter smirked, but there was no humor behind it. "You always did have a habit of doing things you shouldn't." Mia shook her head. "Carter, what the hell is going on? The department's acting weird, like they just want this case to disappear. And now I hear that Ivy might have seen something." His stomach tightened. "Lauren won't let me talk to her, but yeah. Ivy told me she saw someone. The night Hale was killed." Mia straightened. "She saw the real killer?" Carter hesitated. "She saw someone. A man. Near her house. Right before the murder." Mia frowned. "That doesn't make sense. The official timeline has Hale getting killed across town. If a suspect was near Ivy's place, what does that mean?" Carter's mind raced. It meant one thing. The timeline was wrong. His pulse quickened. "Mia, I need you to check the case files again. Look at the security footage, the timestamps. Someone's lying." Mia exhaled. "You're asking me to go against the department, Carter." "I know." He leaned forward. "But if I'm right, and this whole case is a setup, they're not just coming after me. They'll come after Ivy too." Mia's expression darkened. "If that's true, she's not safe." Carter clenched his fists. "Find her, Mia. Keep her safe. And find out who's pulling the strings." She studied him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "I'll see what I can do." Carter's chest tightened with gratitude. He trusted Mia more than anyone. If she was on his side, he still had a chance. As Mia stood up to leave, she hesitated. "You know they won't let you out of here, right?" Carter smirked, but this time, there was steel behind it. "Not unless I give them a reason to." Mia shook her head and walked away, disappearing through the security doors. Carter exhaled slowly. The fight wasn't over yet. And if the people who framed him thought they had won, they were dead wrong. Mia Calloway drove through the city with her grip tight on the steering wheel, her mind racing. Everything about Carter's case felt wrong. From the moment he had been arrested, there had been too many convenient details, evidence too perfect, witnesses too unreliable, and a forceful push from the higher-ups to close the case quickly. Now, after hearing what Carter had told her, it all made sense. Someone had set him up. And worse, Ivy might be in danger. Mia pulled into the driveway of Lauren Briggs' house, cutting the engine. She had already called ahead, insisting that they needed to talk. Lauren had been reluctant, but the moment Mia mentioned Ivy's safety, she agreed to meet. Taking a deep breath, Mia stepped out and rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, Lauren opened the door, her expression guarded. "Detective Calloway." Mia nodded. "Lauren. Thanks for agreeing to talk." Lauren hesitated before stepping aside. "Come in." The house was neat and quiet, the air filled with the faint scent of lavender. Ivy sat curled up on the couch, clutching a stuffed bear, her eyes wary as she watched Mia enter. Mia's heart clenched. She's been through too much already. Lauren crossed her arms. "All right, what's this about? You said Ivy was in danger." Mia exhaled and took a seat across from them. "Carter told me that Ivy saw someone the night of Hale's murder. A man near this house." Lauren tensed, but Ivy's eyes widened. "You did see someone, didn't you?" Mia asked gently, leaning forward. Ivy hesitated, then slowly nodded. I didn't think it was important. Mia's pulse quickened. Can you describe him? Ivy clutched her bear tighter. He was tall. He had a scar on his hand. Mia's breath caught. A scar? Ivy nodded. Right here. She pointed to the back of her left hand. Mia's mind raced. She knew that scar. She had seen it before. Her stomach dropped. Sergeant Daniel Westwood. He was one of Graves' most trusted men. Lauren frowned. Who is that? Do you know him? Mia forced her face to stay neutral. Maybe. She turned back to Ivy. You did the right thing telling me this. But I need to know, did you see where he went? Ivy nodded. He got into a black car. But I don't remember the numbers on the plate. It's okay, Mia reassured her. That already helps a lot. She stood up, turning to Lauren. You need to get Ivy out of here. Tonight. Lauren's face twisted in worry. Why? What's going on? Mia lowered her voice. If Ivy saw Westwood, and if he's involved in the setup against Carter, then she's a loose end. They won't take chances. Lauren's face paled. Oh my God. Mia pulled out a small card and handed it to her. I have a safe house set up. Take Ivy and go there. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Not even your closest friends. Lauren hesitated, looking between Mia and Ivy. But then she nodded, her maternal instincts kicking in. Okay. We'll go. Mia exhaled in relief. Good. I'll check in soon. As she walked back to her car, her hands clenched into fists. Westwood. If he was involved, then this went deeper than just Graves. Mia knew one thing for sure, it was time to start digging. And she wasn't stopping until she unearthed every last lie. Because now? This wasn't just about Carter anymore. This was about protecting Ivy before it was too late. Mia didn't go back to the precinct that night. She couldn't. Not when she now knew the truth. If Sergeant Daniel Westwood was involved in framing Carter, that meant Captain Nolan Graves wasn't acting alone. There were more people pulling the strings. She parked her car in a dimly lit alley, far from where anyone could track her. Taking out her laptop, she accessed the department's internal database using a secure backdoor, something she wasn't supposed to have access to anymore. She typed in Daniel Westwood. His record was spotless. Too spotless. No complaints, no misconduct reports, which was impossible for someone who had been on the force for over a decade. Then she searched Nolan Graves. A few minor complaints. Nothing significant. But when she cross-referenced the two men's records, something jumped out. Westwood had transferred into the department the same month Hale had become an informant. Coincidence? Not a chance. Mia dug deeper, looking at phone logs, payroll records, off-duty assignments. And then she found it, something that sent a chill down her spine. Westwood and Graves had been withdrawing large sums of money from an unregistered account for months. She quickly traced the account. It was linked to a security firm, a private contracting company. Mia frowned. What the hell are you two doing? She clicked further. And then, she found it. A list of names. Some were officers. Others were civilians. And one name made her breath catch. Lauren Briggs. Mia's blood ran cold. She grabbed her phone and dialed Lauren's number. It rang. And rang. Then, voicemail. Something was wrong. Mia slammed her car into drive and sped toward the safe house. Lauren knew something was wrong the moment she stepped outside with Ivy. She had packed their bags quickly, her hands shaking as she shoved clothes and essentials into a suitcase. Mia's warning had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. But when she stepped onto the porch, she froze. A black car sat parked across the street. And a man was watching them. Ivy gasped, gripping her mother's hand. "Mom, it's him." Lauren didn't hesitate. She grabbed Ivy and ran. They barely made it to the car when the black vehicle's engine roared to life. Tires screeched. A second later, headlights flooded the driveway. Lauren threw the car into reverse, nearly hitting the mailbox as she peeled away. Ivy was crying in the passenger seat. "Mom, what's happening?" Lauren's knuckles turned white as she gripped the wheel. "Hold on, baby." The black car followed. It was gaining on them. Lauren's heart slammed in her chest. Then, her phone rang. She saw the name, Mia Calloway. She hit speaker. "Mia, they're following us." Mia's voice was sharp, all business. "Where are you?" I don't know. We're near Route 9. Drive toward me." "I'm on my way." Lauren's pulse pounded in her ears. She pressed the gas pedal harder. But the black car was faster. It swerved, pulling up beside them. A window rolled down. And a gun pointed right at them. Lauren screamed. Ivy ducked, her arms over her head. Then, a gunshot. The rear windshield exploded. Glass shattered. Lauren swerved, nearly losing control. "MOM!" Ivy screamed. Lauren's vision blurred from panic, but then, red and blue lights appeared in the distance. "Mia!" The black car slammed on its brakes and made a hard turn, disappearing into the night. Lauren barely managed to pull over before the adrenaline crashed through her. Mia's squad car skidded to a stop beside them. She jumped out, gun drawn, scanning the area. But the black car was gone. Lauren was shaking uncontrollably. Ivy threw herself into her mother's arms, sobbing. Mia crouched beside them. "You're okay," she said. "You're safe." Lauren's breath hitched. Who were they? Mia's jaw tightened. People who want Ivy silenced. She looked Lauren dead in the eyes. "But we're not gonna let that happen." Lauren nodded, gripping Ivy tighter. Mia stood up, her mind racing. Whoever these people were, they weren't just after Carter. They were willing to kill a 10-year-old girl. And that meant one thing. They were running out of time. Mia didn't sleep that night. Neither did Lauren. After the terrifying chase, Mia had taken them to a secondary safe house, a secluded cabin outside the city, where no one could track them. Ivy had cried herself to sleep in her mother's arms, but Lauren still sat awake in the dimly lit living room, her body stiff with fear. Mia paced near the window, phone in hand, waiting. She had put in an emergency call to Carter's lawyer, Jacob Miles, hours ago. He was the only legal mind she trusted, and she needed a plan. Finally, her phone buzzed. She answered immediately. "Tell me you have something." Jacob sighed on the other end. "I have a lot of somethings. And none of it's good." Mia exhaled sharply. "Give it to me straight." Jacob's voice dropped lower. "I got access to the original evidence file in Carter's case. And you were right, the timeline is completely off. The prosecution claimed Hale was murdered at 9:30 p.m., and they confirmed it using CCTV footage that supposedly showed Carter near the scene around that time." Mia's stomach twisted. "But?" Jacob hesitated. "But the footage was doctored. I found the unedited files in a backup server. Carter wasn't there at 9:30. He wasn't even in the city." Mia's grip on the phone tightened. They really did frame him. "And it gets worse," Jacob continued. "The officer who logged the fake footage as evidence?" Mia already knew the answer before he said it. Daniel Westwood. Her free hand clenched into a fist. Jacob kept going. If we can get that real footage to court, we can file for a retrial. Carter's conviction could be overturned within weeks. Mia ran a hand through her hair. We don't have weeks, Jacob. I know, he admitted. Which is why I need you to stall them. Keep Ivy safe. If we lose her, we lose our biggest witness. Mia's jaw locked. Understood. She hung up and turned back to Lauren. They framed him, Mia said. And now they're trying to erase every loose end, including Ivy. Lauren swallowed hard, gripping the blanket around her shoulders. What do we do? Mia looked out the window, scanning the dark tree line. We stop running. Lauren's eyes widened. What? We can't hide forever. They'll find us eventually. Mia turned back to her. We need to go after them first. The next morning, Mia made a risky move. She took Ivy into the city. Not into the precinct, that wasn't safe. Instead, she took her to a secure private office where Jacob was waiting. Ivy sat in a chair, her small hands clasped together tightly. She looked nervous, her eyes flicking between Mia and Jacob. Ivy, Mia said gently, crouching beside her. I need you to do something very important. Ivy nodded. Okay. Mia slid a tablet in front of her. I want you to look at these pictures carefully and tell me if any of them look like the man you saw that night. Ivy hesitated, then started scrolling through the images. Each picture was of a different officer in Graves' circle. When she got to Westwood's photo, her hand stopped. Her breathing quickened. That's him, she whispered. Mia and Jacob exchanged a look. You're sure? Jacob asked. Ivy nodded firmly. Yes. Mia exhaled. That was it. The link they needed. Jacob turned to Mia. If we can get Ivy's statement on record, we can push for an immediate investigation into Westwood. If he flips, he'll bring Graves down with him. Mia's gut twisted. That's a big if. Jacob sighed. Yeah. But it's the only shot we've got. Mia rubbed her temples. They were running out of time. Graves and Westwood had already tried to kill Ivy once. If they caught wind of what she had just done, they'd try again. That night, Mia sat alone in the safe house's kitchen, staring at a map of the city. Lauren had finally gotten Ivy to sleep, but the tension in the air was thick. They were sitting on a ticking time bomb. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up, expecting Jacob. But the number was blocked. She hesitated, then answered. Who is this? A deep, familiar voice came through the line. Detective Calloway. You've been busy. Her breath caught. Graves. She gripped the phone. How the hell did you get this number? Graves chuckled. Come on, Mia. You know me better than that. Mia forced her voice to stay steady. If this is a threat, you're wasting your time. A threat? Graves mused. No. Consider this a courtesy call. Mia's blood turned ice cold. You've got something of mine, Graves continued. And I want it back. Her jaw clenched. I don't know what you're talking about. Graves chuckled again. Ivy. Mia stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. If you touch that girl. Oh, I wouldn't dream of it, Graves interrupted smoothly. But accidents happen, don't they? Children get lost. Cars have faulty brakes. Mia's pulse pounded in her ears. Graves lowered his voice. You have until tomorrow. Bring the girl to me, or you'll regret it. The line went dead. Mia slammed her phone onto the table. Lauren ran in, eyes wide. What happened? Mia's fists clenched. Graves just made his move. Lauren paled. What do we do? Mia exhaled, forcing her mind to clear. We do exactly what they don't expect. She turned to Lauren. We go after them first. Mia didn't hesitate. She knew they had to move fast. Graves had just given them a deadline, and that meant one thing: he was desperate. She gathered everything she had: her gun, her badge, her phone, and the USB drive containing the real evidence that could exonerate Carter. She wasn't going to play defense anymore. She was taking the fight to them. Lauren was pale, her hands trembling as she sat at the kitchen table. Ivy, still half asleep, sat beside her, rubbing her eyes. We have to go, Mia said, checking her weapon. Now. Lauren swallowed hard. Where? Mia turned to her. To end this. They left the safe house before dawn, taking a back route toward the city. Mia knew they couldn't just turn Ivy over to the authorities, not when Graves still had influence inside the department. If they wanted justice, they had to get irrefutable proof and make it public before Graves could silence them. That's why they were heading straight to Jacob Miles' private law office. Jacob had connections in the media, people who weren't afraid to expose corruption. If they could get Ivy's testimony, the unedited security footage, and Carter's falsified reports into the right hands, the entire city would see the truth before Graves had time to cover it up. The drive was tense. Every time a car passed, Lauren tensed, gripping Ivy's hand. Mia kept checking the rearview mirror, her heart pounding. If Graves was watching them, he would make his move soon. They were 15 minutes from the law office when Mia's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID. Jacob. She put him on speaker. Tell me you're ready. Jacob's voice was tight. I was. But we have a problem. Mia's grip tightened on the wheel. What kind of problem? Jacob exhaled sharply. Westwood's dead. Mia's heart slammed into her ribs. What? Body was found early this morning. Execution style. No witnesses, no security footage. Jacob's voice darkened. It was a cleanup job. They knew we were coming for him. Lauren gasped from the back seat. Ivy shrank into her mother's arms, sensing the fear in the air. Mia cursed under her breath. This was worse than she thought. Graves wasn't just silencing loose ends, he was accelerating his plan. Jacob continued, that means one thing: Ivy is the last witness who can prove Carter's innocence. If they get to her. They won't, Mia said firmly. Jacob hesitated. Mia. I don't think the law office is safe anymore. I just got word that someone's been sniffing around, asking about you. This is bigger than we thought. Mia's blood ran cold. Then we need a new plan. She thought fast. If they couldn't go to Jacob's office, where could they go? Then it hit her. The courthouse. It was risky, but it was the one place Graves couldn't control directly. If they went there now, they could get Ivy's testimony in front of a judge before Graves had a chance to stop them. She made a hard right turn. We're going to the courthouse, she said. Jacob cursed. Mia, that's dangerous. If they know you're coming. Then we make it count, Mia cut in. Get there now. Jacob hesitated, then sighed. All right. I'll meet you there. She hung up and hit the gas. This was it. One way or another, everything was ending today. The courthouse was already buzzing with early morning hearings when Mia pulled up to the back entrance. She could see reporters setting up outside, their cameras rolling. Perfect. If anything went wrong, at least there would be witnesses. She led Lauren and Ivy through the side door, bypassing the main security checkpoint. Jacob was waiting for them inside, looking tense. I pulled some strings, he said. I got us an emergency hearing in front of Judge Morales. But we don't have long. Mia nodded. Then let's move. They rushed down the hallway, weaving through the maze of courtrooms and offices. Ivy clung to her mother's hand, her small legs struggling to keep up. Then, Mia felt it. A shift in the air. She stopped just in time. From the far end of the hallway, Graves stepped into view. His expression was calm, but his eyes were cold. And behind him, 3 men in suits stood with their hands resting near their holsters. Mia instinctively moved in front of Ivy, her hand going to her gun. "Detective Calloway," Graves said smoothly. "I was hoping we'd catch up." Mia glared at him. "You should have stayed in the shadows where you belong, Graves." He smirked. "I told you to bring me the girl. Instead, you're making a scene." Jacob stepped forward. "If you so much as touch them, this whole courthouse will know the truth." Graves' expression darkened. "The truth?" He took a step closer. "The truth is that you're all in over your heads. Walk away now, and I'll make sure no one gets hurt." Mia let out a sharp laugh. "You really think we're just gonna hand Ivy over?" Graves sighed. "I was hoping you'd be smart about this." He flicked his wrist. One of his men reached for his gun. Mia moved first. Bang! The sound of the gunshot exploded through the hallway. People screamed. Mia tackled Ivy and Lauren to the ground as the bullet shattered a nearby window. Jacob dove behind a bench. Chaos erupted. Security officers stormed in. The 3 men with Graves were swarmed within seconds, but Graves? He was gone. Mia cursed and pulled Ivy to her feet. "We have to go. Now." Jacob led the way, pushing open the doors to the courtroom. Judge Morales was already inside, startled by the commotion. "What the hell is going on?" Mia stepped forward, breathing hard. "Your Honor, we need to put Ivy Briggs on record right now." The judge frowned. "Why?" Jacob handed him the USB drive. "Because this case isn't just about Carter Briggs anymore. It's about police corruption at the highest level." The judge plugged in the drive. As he watched the security footage, his face changed. Mia saw it, the exact moment he realized everything was a lie. He looked at Ivy. "Young lady, are you ready to tell your story?" Ivy swallowed, then nodded. Mia exhaled. It was finally happening. They had the truth. Now, they just had to survive long enough to make sure the world heard it. The courtroom fell silent as Ivy Briggs sat in the witness chair, her small hands gripping the wooden armrests. The weight of every eye in the room pressed down on her, but she held her head high. She had been scared for so long, but not anymore. Judge Morales, now fully aware of the gravity of the situation, looked at her kindly. "Take your time, Miss Briggs. Tell us what you saw." Ivy swallowed hard, then took a deep breath. "That night, the night Mr. Hale was killed. I saw a man near my house," she said, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "He was watching our house from across the street. He had a scar on his hand." Judge Morales nodded. "And do you recognize this man?" Ivy nodded. "Yes. It was Sergeant Daniel Westwood." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even some of the officers standing guard looked at each other in shock. Mia glanced at Jacob Miles, who was watching with sharp focus. This was it. The moment that would crack this case wide open. Judge Morales turned to Jacob. "Do you have evidence to support this claim?" Jacob handed the judge the USB drive. "Your Honor, this contains the unedited security footage that proves Carter Briggs was nowhere near the crime scene when Robert Hale was murdered. It also shows that the timestamps on the original evidence were altered to frame him." The judge plugged in the drive and played the footage. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the real timeline unfolded. Carter Briggs, the man sitting in prison for years, wasn't even in the same part of the city at the time of the murder. But that wasn't the most damning part. The footage showed Westwood entering Hale's building. And then, another man joining him. The courtroom collectively held its breath as the second man turned toward the camera, his face clearly visible for just a few seconds before stepping into the shadows. Captain Nolan Graves. Mia felt a chill run down her spine. There it was. Undeniable proof. Graves had been there. He had been directly involved in murdering a state witness. Judge Morales' face darkened. This evidence is compelling. I am issuing an immediate stay on Carter Briggs' conviction. Mia's breath caught. It was happening. I am also ordering an immediate warrant for the arrest of Captain Nolan Graves. Boom. The courtroom exploded with noise. Reporters rushed out of the room to break the news. Officers whispered to each other, some looking nervous, others furious that their so-called leader had betrayed them. But there was one problem. Graves wasn't here. Mia's stomach twisted. He knew this was coming. Judge Morales banged his gavel. Detective Calloway, is there a location on Captain Graves? Mia was already pulling out her phone. I'll find him. She turned to Jacob. Get Ivy and Lauren somewhere safe. Now. Jacob didn't argue. He grabbed them and rushed them out of the courtroom just as police sirens wailed outside. Mia sprinted toward the exit. She was going to end this. Mia jumped into her car, her hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her phone buzzed as a text from one of her trusted officers popped up. Graves is running. Last seen near the docks. Mia hit the gas. She knew exactly where he was going. The docks were a known escape route for criminals with connections. If Graves had a way out of the city, it would be through there. She sped through the city streets, weaving through traffic, adrenaline coursing through her veins. When she reached the docks, she cut the engine and pulled out her gun. The air was thick with the smell of salt and gasoline. In the distance, she saw a private boat already running. And there, standing near the loading ramp, was Nolan Graves. Mia stepped forward, gun raised. Going somewhere, Captain? Graves turned slowly, his face eerily calm. I was wondering when you'd show up, he said smoothly. You always were persistent. Mia took another step forward. Drop the act, Graves. It's over. The judge just issued a warrant for your arrest. Graves sighed, shaking his head. You really don't get it, do you, Calloway? He smirked. This was never just about Carter. The corruption in this city runs deeper than you could ever imagine. Mia didn't flinch. And you're going to be the first one to go down for it. Graves chuckled, then took a slow step toward the boat. Mia's finger hovered over the trigger. Don't move. Graves paused, tilting his head. Then, suddenly, he reached for his gun. Mia fired first. The shot ripped through the air, hitting Graves in the leg. He collapsed onto the dock, clutching his thigh and groaning in pain. Seconds later, sirens blared as police cars surrounded the docks. Officers stormed in, weapons drawn. Mia exhaled sharply and stepped closer, keeping her gun trained on him. This is where it ends, Graves. He chuckled through gritted teeth. For me, maybe. But this city? It's still rotten. Mia narrowed her eyes. Then I guess it's time to clean house. Officers rushed in, cuffing Graves as he winced in pain. Mia finally lowered her gun. It was over. But the fight wasn't done yet. She had one more person to see. Hours later, Mia stood outside Ironwood Correctional Facility as the gates slid open. Carter Briggs walked out, a free man. He looked different, his face was tired, worn from years of injustice. But the moment his eyes landed on her, a familiar fire returned. Mia smirked. "Took you long enough." Carter chuckled, shaking his head. "You really couldn't have done this any faster?" Before Mia could respond, a small voice called out, "Daddy!" Carter turned just in time to see Ivy running toward him. His breath caught. Then, in an instant, she was in his arms, sobbing against his chest. "I knew you didn't do it," she whispered. Carter held her tightly, closing his eyes. "I love you, baby. So much." Lauren stood nearby, her face streaked with tears. "I'm so sorry, Carter. I should have believed you." Carter exhaled slowly, still holding Ivy. "We've got time to fix things." Mia crossed her arms. "And you'll have plenty of that time, considering you're not going back to that cell." Carter looked at her. "What about Graves?" Mia smirked. "He's not going anywhere." Carter let out a long breath, relief finally sinking in. For the first time in years, he was free. And as he held Ivy close, surrounded by the people who had fought for him, he realized something. He had lost everything once. But now? He had everything that truly mattered. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the quiet suburban street. It had been a week since Carter had been released from prison, and yet, every morning he woke up expecting to hear the metallic clank of cell doors and the echoing footsteps of guards. Freedom still felt like a dream. But today, as he stood on the front porch of a small house, his house, watching Ivy chase a butterfly through the grass, reality finally began to sink in. He was home. Lauren stepped out onto the porch beside him, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him, her expression softer than it had been in years. "She's happy," she said quietly, watching their daughter laugh as she twirled in the afternoon sun. Carter nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "Yeah, she is." Lauren hesitated before speaking again. I don't know how to make up for what I did, Carter. I should have believed you. I should have fought for you." Carter turned to her, taking in the guilt written all over her face. He sighed, gripping the warm coffee cup in his hands. "You were scared. I get it. But Ivy never gave up on me. And in the end, neither did you." Lauren looked away, blinking back tears. "I want to fix things. For Ivy. For us." Carter exhaled slowly. "We'll take it one day at a time." A small voice interrupted them. "Daddy." Ivy came running toward him, her face bright with excitement. She held up the butterfly she had caught in cupped hands. "Look. It landed on me." Carter knelt down, smiling as he gently touched her tiny fingers. The butterfly flapped its delicate wings before lifting off into the sky. Ivy watched it go, then turned back to her father. "You're not going away again, right?" she asked, her voice small. Carter's heart clenched. He placed his hands on her shoulders, looking her in the eyes. "Never, baby. I promise." Ivy studied his face for a moment, then grinned, throwing her arms around his neck. "Good. Because I have a lot of stuff to tell you." Carter chuckled, holding her close. "I've got all the time in the world to listen." Later that evening, Carter met Mia at a quiet diner downtown. She was already at a booth when he walked in, sipping her usual black coffee. She raised an eyebrow as he slid into the seat across from her. "You look like a man who hasn't slept in a week," she remarked. Carter smirked. "I've spent years in a concrete box, Calloway. I'm still adjusting." Mia leaned back. "Well, you'd better adjust fast. You've got reporters knocking on Jacob's door, asking for exclusive interviews about the wrongfully convicted detective who took down a corrupt police captain." Carter scoffed. "I don't want any of that. I just want to move on." Mia nodded. Fair enough. But the truth is out there now. Graves is in a federal holding cell, and they're still digging through all the cases he tampered with. You helped expose something huge, Carter. You should be proud of that. Carter sighed, running a hand over his face. I just want to make sure Ivy is safe. That's all that matters to me. Mia's expression softened. She is safe. Because of you. And because of herself. That kid's got more guts than half the cops I know. Carter chuckled. Yeah. She's tough. Mia took a sip of her coffee, then set the cup down. So, what's next for you? Carter leaned back in the booth, exhaling slowly. I don't know yet. I spent so long trying to survive in there. I never let myself think about what happens after. Mia smirked. Ever thought about putting the badge back on? Carter laughed, shaking his head. Hell no. I'm done playing by their rules. He looked at her. But I wouldn't mind working outside the system. Helping the people the law forgets about. Mia raised an eyebrow. You saying you want to go private? Carter shrugged. Maybe. I hear there's a market for guys like me. Mia smirked. If you ever need a partner, you know where to find me. Carter smiled. I'll keep that in mind. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Mia glanced at her watch. I should go. But I'm glad you're out, Briggs. Carter nodded. Me too. Mia tossed some cash onto the table and slid out of the booth. Try to sleep sometime, will you? Carter chuckled as she walked away. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't let himself believe in for a long time. Hope. That night, as Carter tucked Ivy into bed, she looked up at him sleepily. Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart? She hesitated. Are the bad guys all gone now? Carter brushed a strand of hair from her face. Some of them. But there will always be more. Ivy frowned. That's scary. Carter smiled softly. It is. But as long as we have people who are willing to fight for what's right, the bad guys don't win. Ivy thought about this for a moment, then nodded. Like you and Detective Mia? Carter chuckled. Yeah. Like that. She yawned, her eyelids drooping. I think when I grow up, I want to help people too. Carter's heart swelled. I think you already do, baby. She smiled sleepily, curling up under the blanket. Night, Daddy. Carter kissed her forehead. Good night, Ivy. As he walked to the doorway, he took one last look at her peaceful face, then switched off the light. Stepping into the hallway, he exhaled deeply. The weight that had sat on his chest for years was finally lifting. He was free. He was home. And no one was ever taking that away from him again. The ending of this story is powerful, emotional, and deeply satisfying, but most importantly, it delivers a message of resilience, justice, and redemption. Carter Briggs' journey from a respected officer to a wrongly convicted prisoner, and finally, to a free man reclaiming his life, is not just a fight for himself but a battle for truth in a corrupt system. What makes this story truly gripping is that Ivy, a child, becomes the key to justice. Her bravery in standing up against dangerous forces, despite her fear, is both inspiring and heartbreaking. Too often, those who are powerless are ignored, but here, a young girl's voice is the very thing that dismantles a web of lies. It reminds us that courage can come from anyone, no matter their age. Mia Calloway also stands out as a symbol of integrity. In a world where the people meant to uphold the law are the ones breaking it, she chooses to go against the grain. Her role is crucial, not just as an ally to Carter but as someone who refuses to let injustice win, even when the odds are against her. The final scene, where Carter is reunited with Ivy, is the perfect emotional payoff. It's not just about proving his innocence, it's about rebuilding what was stolen from him, his relationship with his daughter, his sense of self, and his future. But what makes this ending even stronger is that it doesn't pretend that evil is completely gone. Corruption still exists. More battles will come. And Carter, though free, has scars that won't fade. Yet, hope shines through, in Ivy's innocence, in Carter's determination, and in the knowledge that as long as people are willing to fight for the truth, justice can still prevail. This is the kind of story that stays with you, not just because of its twists and emotional weight, but because it reflects real-world struggles. It forces us to ask, how many people are sitting behind bars for crimes they didn't commit? How many powerful figures manipulate the system for their own gain? And how many Carters are still waiting for their Ivy to speak up for them? In the end, this isn't just a story about one man's redemption. It's a story about how truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the surface.